everybody, we are back, my dear confused tenor society. This time I am joined by a wonderful, wonderful longtime friend and colleague, someone who is absolutely kicking butt and someone that I admire so much. Love the color of his voice. And I'm talking about the fantastic, the great American tenor, Matthew White. How are you doing, Matt? How you doing? It's been such a long time. How you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm doing good, Jose. How about you?
Good. I love always like videoing you or calling you because you're always in the middle of some sort of nature. And to us, you're looking, I don't know where you are, but you look like you're like in the middle of the forest or something like that. And it's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I'm on a marshy island. So
March.
yeah, it's a
Nice.
marshy island of Montreal, So
It's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love it. And I know that you were also just in Chicago as well. Your Instagram stuff, singing Manon, which is fantastic. I have your biography here. And I was going to tell the people that I mean, you have some recently, Don José, or will perform Don José with the Vancouver Opera. You've sung
I
like the
already did
Dallas
that.
Opera.
That's
Oh,
old.
you did that. Okay,
Yeah,
this old stuff. Uh, uh, you have been with the Salzburg East Festival, singing in Utah Opera, singing Duca, Madama Butterfly. Actually, in Opera de Montréal, you sang Madama Butterfly. In
yep.
concert, you've done stuff like Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex, and you've just been, I mean, there's just a few things. Traviata in Houston Grand Opera, just big singing in great places. And we kind of want to dig into your head. So the most recent thing was the Manon Lescaut, right, at Chicago Opera Festival.
Yeah.
That's awesome, and shout out to also Franco Pomponi and
Yeah.
Emmanuel that are killing it over there. Wonderful. It's a great festival because they like to do a lot of pieces that aren't really performed, right,
Yeah.
in the opera repertoire, like little hidden gems. So it's really nice if you're in the Chicago area. Really give them look them up and support them when you can. And they're really great festival.
It's a
Um,
pretty fun company. They
yeah,
they definitely
nice.
deserve to grow because not a lot of stuff's going on opera-wise in Chicago in the summertime. So
Right. Yeah.
it's
It's always during the summer, which is great. Which is great. So Matt, we want to dig into your head. You have one of those voices that when I hear it, it reminds me immediately of, old school tenor singers. How is it that someone that is from Florida, grew up in Virginia, how does someone find that sound to them? Like, what is your methodology as a tenor, if you could simplify it?
it's been a
I
long
know it's hard to simplify it.
yeah. I mean, to find that sound, you just have to hear it, right? I mean, that was when I found it. I wasn't a singer growing up. I was a violinist. So for me, like I think something that you really hear in old school sound or old school singing is like the thread of silver or the thread of gold that's in the center of the voice at all the time. And you don't
Mm,
hear obstruction around it. And so for me it's just like a violin because the voice is like any instruments, the sound box, so the body of the violin, and the strings would be the vocal cords. So this idea that there's nothing obstructing the strings from the violin. Like when you play violin, you can mute. You can lightly press your fingers so you have a little bit of dullness on the sound, or you can move your bow up over the fingerboard or back right along the bridge. It just depends on the type of sound you want. And I think approaching voice like that, looking for clarity and looking for something that's unobstructed, can really be helpful in that way.
I love that. I love that. Actually, to a lot of people that I teach, I always liken singing to play an instrument. To keep everything vibrating, to keep everything legato, to keep everything running. It's just like an instrumentalist would. Sometimes like we start singing and warming up, and we don't think that way. Or we think note, when it should be more connected to the body, more connected, vibrating everything, really just the sound being much more energetic.
Everything
And you
praise
meant, yeah,
exercises.
yeah, yeah. And it's going to apply it, if we think about it that way, it's going to apply it to the repertoire much better to the once you start adding the words, the language, the consonants. If you're already stuck thinking note, sound, instead of thinking more of this idea of release and freedom and vibrancy, when you start adding language and stuff, you're going to get overwhelmed and the voice is just going to get stuck. But you mentioned this very interesting thing about this idea of the old school tenors having this gold and silver sound. And I know what you're talking about, but just for the people at home watching, what are you referring to in this case? That sort of steel in the sound.
It's the center of the pitch, and I think it's something that's really missing. So if anybody plays strings or guitar or piano, as soon as you hit that key on the piano, you hear an instant, like a percussive sound. And same with the violin. As soon as you start that bow, there's an instant sound. It's not a warm sound. It's not a beautiful sound. If you took away the body of the violin and you just had the strings tuned to E, A, D, G, and you started playing that, it would be this thread of just annoying resonance. And that's the center of the voice. That's the core. And everything around it is the beauty of the voice. But the pitch and the center, the silver, the gold should come from just that basic function of two vocal cords coming together. It's like violin string and a bow, a guitar and a pick, a piano and a finger, a trumpet and your embouchure. That instantaneous start, that constant that exists has to be there, or it won't work.
I love that. It's that attack to the chord, which we talk about, probably the chord closure, right? Which sometimes we can get if we start practicing these subglottal attacks. But really making sure that we're continuously having that clear chord closure in the sound to have that squealo, that presence. How do you do it? How do you approach it? Something like that.
Well, that's the thing. There's two different schools of thought on this. I think that are the good schools. There's the idea that air comes first and the idea that chord closure comes first. And I think that to be versatile, you should have the access to both. But I think the biggest thing that I think about with that type of chord closure that you're using is that the origination of that onset needs to be correct, or it can lead to problems down the road. Because if you just go this what I'm doing is fine closure, but the position of the throat and the attack of the chords is going to lead to problems the way I did it there. If you go this is the proper way to do it, because I'm actually using glottis to do that. I'm not in a full column of the voice. And when you do that at a slightly lifted position and with glottis, what happens is, instead of the chords staying slightly sucked down and using just like the fine top edge of the chords, you end up, the chords slightly rotate and you get slightly thick phonation in the middle. And when you do that, as you go up, you're relying on glottis strength to get into the top. So you end up rolling to the bottom edges. And this is how you get a dull sound in the top, or an overblown sound in the top, because you're relying on strength. And if you don't have strength, you're going to blow a lot of air. You want to rely on this sensation of vacuum in the body. So the onset is, I don't use a lot of glottis in my onsets. I try to use as little as possible. I want it to be I want the closure of the chords to be a byproduct of my support, not a byproduct of tension in the throat. So for me, the idea is every onset should essentially feel like a vacuum in. And the release of that onset is another engagement of that vacuum in.
Okay, I love that. So I mean, the idea is, in other words, to maintain that column first in the onset. Maintain the onset even as you breathe in. Obviously, we breathe in, we create that onset. We're there, because just won't do much. Creating that onset, and then how do you then approach the note? How do you go at it? Do you find that chord closure? Do you release air first? What is sort of the first thoughts that come into your mind right as you're about to attack a note?
The intention of the note now. I mean, when I was learning how to sing, it was much more mechanical. I spent a lot of time just singing notes, but now I actually don't really think about it much. I would say primarily, I'm going to sit up so you can see a little bit better. But if I'm singing well, if I'm not sick, if I don't have thick folds or whatever, most of the time I want to have a sensation that the actual phonation, even though we're phonating in the throat, I want to feel like the phonation starts here and stays here. And as you go up, that stretch, you'll feel an air column in your behind your sternum and your chest, but you don't want to necessarily go as you go into the middle. You feel like this narrows just slightly internally because we have to increase velocity because we're not trying to turn yet. But once you're above the top, it also again feels like a really deep stretch in the chest at the sternum. And if you're singing well, it should feel like the steel and the silver is originating for me, base of the sternum, really where my support is going. So it's
Yeah.
all connected to your appoggio, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you feel it more there. How do you work on your support if you work at it at all? Do you agree that a lot of the support is based honestly on also the sound? Like if the sound is a healthy sound, then the body will support that sound, or is it more of you support something that you should be working on as separated from the sound or something like that?
I think I think of support as slightly different than a lot of people. A lot of people think of support as very energetic. I think of the energetic part of support is just following the spin of the voice. Um, but the actual support itself should be, it's physically active, but it's not a pushing motion. It's not pushing out. I think a lot of the times it's more of a suspension of the body. So when I'm singing, I get sore in my back, my middle back generally. Um, but it's because I'm maintaining an open thoracic cavity essentially. Because when you open here already, I mean, like I just blew out all my air, but I'm still speaking on like the little bit left. All you have to do is stop talking and then release my throat. I'm full of air completely. So for me, a breath is support is sustaining the space to maintain vacuum. I don't think of super low. That's very Germanic. I try to sing more in the old school Italianate technique, but I do use it on occasion. It can come in handy, especially if you're tired and you have like a big B natural coming out. I would say the B and the C is where I would start to go a little bit lower because there's a registration shift for tenor voices. So there's slightly more airflow and less compression on those notes. But also people feel support differently. It depends on your body type. Like the
I was
leaner,
gonna.
smaller you are, you won't feel it as low as someone who's heavier. So
No, I do. I agree. I agree. I was actually going to bring up the whole Germanic idea of like, because they teach very much sort of this belly breathing, pushing out the belly and stuff, which is very low. But it's interesting to know that you as well follow that sort of old school. How would you, in a way, break down your process of singing? So, for example, go from it as far as like, I breathe, lungs go, I mean, air goes into my lungs, I expand, and then, as I exhale, just break it down for us if you can, like in simple steps,
a
sort
simple,
of your.
yeah, I can do that for now. I would say someone who's still really working on finding like basic phonation, this will not work because you really have to train everything else. Everything else has to fall in line before you can get to how I think of singing, because
Right. In years. Yeah.
it becomes secondary. The stuff that's important becomes secondary because first I had to learn what compression was, and first I had to learn how to manage tilt in the larynx and registration shifting as you go over the turn. But now all I do, I take a breath in and I maintain. So here I'm maintaining breath in an open position, vacuum. The throat is open. That there's no pressure being held at the cords. I'm not going. I'm not making a pooping sound. I'm not squeezing.
Right.
I'm just breathing in. Everything's completely relaxed, and then all I do is have this vacuum that I'm sustaining in my thoracic cavity. I allow gravity to do just a little bit of work, but I'm still fighting against gravity, right? We have barometric pressure and gravity pressing on us. That is enough to send enough air to start singing, especially in low and middle range. We don't have to do anything there. Once you get into the top, there'll be some compression in the body, but you're still maintaining this expansion. So for me, the breath in, that's it. I mean, I'm still drinking coffee. It's early, but all I feel is breath in, and try to maintain this, and you feel the vacuum of the chord sucking down. That's it. A basic free phonation where I have no neck muscles involved. The tongue is completely loose. The jaw has nothing going on. How do you make a sound without anything else happening? That's primary one. I mean, you can't do that until you learn how to suspend a larynx in a neutral position, as if you're a high larynx singer, or if you're a pressed singer. You can't do that until you learn how to start letting go of these muscles in the throat, the straps, the glottis. All this stuff can be really in your way there. But for me, it's completely relaxed, nothing happening. I feel my neck just popped. I feel stretch in the back of my neck a lot of times. I feel suspension in the body. There's nothing. I'm just completely dead.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that because, like you said, it is in a way learning to sing is stripping away bad habits, like how to strip away layers of like your jaw tension. You don't need that. Relax it. Your front of the tongue. You don't need that. Neck muscle. You don't need that. It's the idea of stripping away things, and just how you mentioned it. How to just get a sound. Just get a sound in the most minimal way, the most relaxed way, in a way that still is supported and engaged, but just without any extra nonsense things that you don't need, disconnecting all the stuff you don't need. And it's good to mention that for you right now it's like 10 in the morning, so thanks for demonstrating. Now as you ascend as a tenor, everybody's freaking out about the high notes. All we care is about high notes. As you ascend, in order to continue to maintain that chord closure, right? We need to allow the chords to stretch and to thin, right? Which is very, very important, because if we keep the chord closure, if we keep the chords small and thick, that's where all the problems start happening, right? Allowing it.
You're actually, you had tilt, so your chords are stretched, but you were singing on the bottom end. So just for clarification, what he just did, that was a fully stretched position, but on the bottom edge of the chords.
Yeah. It's hard for me to it's hard for me to not stretch the chords after just so many years of doing it. Yeah. So for you, as you ascend and you're used to this idea of how do you approach the ability to maintain that steel, that chord closure, but allowing the chords to thin? Do you think a lot about this, like the yawning, the sighing, the tenor cry that so many people talk about? The sirens. How's your approach to that?
Well, the way I learned, I had a really, really amazing teacher when I was younger. I didn't have a lot of teachers. I had, I would say my two teachers that set up my fundamental technique were Steve O'Mara and Rick Chrisman. And I studied with Steve for, 8 months. We kept in contact. And he was the type of teacher who gave me a toolbox and said, these are the tools to use to do this. But one of the biggest tools in that was head voice. So, and not falsetto. And I've taken this further than what I was able to get from him. Steve's passed away, but the idea is, how do you maintain learning the top? I would say the best way to do it without using pressure and without risking vocal damage or blowing your voice out. One, if you're learning how to sing, don't sing arias. Don't sing songs. When I was doing this, I took 3 years where I didn't sing arias or songs. I dropped out of school. I've never done a song recital. The first role I ever sang was Werther. So when I got into this, most of my practice time was doing registration blending. So I would start with head voice. Ooh. Already, it's too early for this. So the idea is, how do you go through a fully clean registration blend? And there's 2 ways you can do it. The first starting out way is with falsetto, because a lot of people don't have access to supported head, and falsetto, we are completely loose, right? So that's, it's harder to blend falsetto with chest. But once you've gotten this where you're free and you can make the transition between the 2 voices, the way I like to think about it is, if you have the side of your head a lot of people do head voice, falsetto this way. And unfortunately, with registration, as you're coming down from the sensation of head, if you come down the front or the mask, so to speak, you run into the hard palate. Ooh, and then you have to break through and get under the hard palate. So this is one of the first things that people run into. Ooh, the break. So the idea is the doorway between registration to be able to blend is actually in the back. Think of it almost behind your head. So once you're in head voice, you can start up here. It's like a triangle this way. Then you can come back again forward onto the hard palate. But if you're starting above the hard palate, it's back. You have to go through the passage in the soft palate and then come back forward. Then you can be on the hard palate. But
I see.
So for me, the learning the top was being able to manage registration between head and chest. So now I can say, I'll even sing like full rolls or arias just in a supported head, not falsetto. So the difference would be ha is falsetto versus like this has some chest in the sound at all times.
Yeah.
And for me, I can take chest up to I'm in on a really good day in E flat. You know, I can maintain chest in that, and then there's a switch for me where if I was like trying to sing a high F, it would be very much like a voix mix falsetto dominant sound, but still it's got enough to it. But the idea is maintain that thread that you have in chest. You don't ever lose your anchor here, but then blend through that registration into a more head voice dominant, or I think it's CT dominant function, but you're still connected to chest. So for me, as you go up, I keep that anchor, but I never let that anchor be thick, because when you go thick, you end up pulling width in the throat. And when you pull width in the throat, it's harder for the cords to close. So then it requires more glottis, which is taxing. Your throat's not nearly as strong as your body is. So for me, I would say the best way to approach it, and the way that I really approach it, was through registration and doing it in completely easy functional stuff. Even when I warm up, like I rarely sing high notes before a show. I rarely sing high notes in my exercises. I don't think about the high notes. I think about the intention, the phrase, and then when it happens, it happens.
Yeah. No, I love you mentioned so many things. It's like I wish I could have like touch base on all the things you mentioned. Well, things I wanted to ask you though, before I go back to the things that you said, is you're obviously very, very well educated in not only just the which a lot of singers are, the instincts and the sensations, but very much the anatomy and the science behind it. Do you suggest for people who are singers who are still developing their voices to not only just go towards the instinct signs, the sensations? A lot of people teach with imagery and this idea of pictures, and to help kind of deliver a concept or in order to understand the concept. Do you also suggest to, on top of that, sure, that's all great, but go actually learn what's happening scientifically in the voice, or do you think that doesn't matter?
I think it can be a useful tool. I'm a very curious person. I'm very technologically oriented, not like tech, but how things work together, engineering standpoint, like how the gears work. So for me, how my brain works, I really like that. Most of the time when I'm teaching, I use a lot of imagery. I'll use terms, but generally unless you've gone through it and you've like seriously meditate on it and really start to get into your body, you're not going to feel these things. You may say, okay, that sensation you're feeling there, if I'm teaching somebody in a lesson and they get something right, I'm like, this is what you're feeling. And then you associate that with that, so you can use that term. But like, I mean, we didn't have those terms, and we had great singers well before any of these terms came out. And I think a lot of pedagogy and vocal science is hit or miss. A lot of the books that are written, I think, are completely incorrect. A lot of the teachers that are out there with their vocal science books are charlatans. So I would say that vocal science is really helpful for diagnosing problems with singers, and it can be useful, but spend the time and read, but have a filter. I mean, I read a lot. I read everything I could get my hands on when I found out about opera, everything. And I also had Steve who was good with terminology and good with vocal pedagogy, that we would talk a lot. I mean, I would spend hours at his house and we'd sit over dinner and talk, and we'd listen to recordings, and he'd say, this person sang this well, this person did this well. And so you have like this array of references that you can check with. And then you start to develop your own taste as you get older, and things change with what you like, what you don't like, and why you like them. But I think really what it is expand your knowledge, develop a good filter, have someone help you develop a filter, because someone can say, I'm not going to mention names, but this modern tenor or this modern baritone is great. But when you look at it in the full scale, they're not good at this. They don't, they're lucky. Technically, it's maybe they're good with what they have, but technically they might not be sound. And there are plenty of voices that I don't even like. I don't like their artistry, or whatever, but have technical foundations that are such excellent examples that you can use those. So you have to develop you have to develop an ear that is fully technical, and you have to develop an ear that is artistic. And then you have to mold those two together for yourself. So read if you'd like. It's not required, but it does help.
That's fantastic advice. I love that. I love it because, the more you do this, the more you realize that the path to singing is really just almost very Buddha. It's very yin yang, You can never go to the extreme of one thing or to the other. It's very much trying to find the balance of a lot of different concepts. The balance of the voice, the balance between imagery and the pedagogue, the balance between, chiaroscuro, the balance of, there's just balances of everything. And sometimes in our journey, I feel like we have to go to the extreme to kind of hit that wall for us to then kind of find where the balance is, and then we might go too far the other way, and then we hit that wall, and then it's just, so it's for the people listening at home, this is great advice that Matt is talking about, because if you feel that way, like you're just hitting one thing and then hitting the other, it is a normal path, but the best advice you can get is to find a balanced view, and yes, if you can have someone help you and filter out the things that you can use and things that you don't need, right? And have someone to help you out with those things. Yeah. Is there any exercise that you can perhaps give people to help someone who perhaps is trying to find that blend or that connection, because they're trying to allow their chords to thin and stretch as they ascend, but then perhaps maybe it's just full falsetto, and then they break as they try to connect down. Is there any exercise that you could be like, how can I help better find that connection to the chest? Because we never want to lose that, right? That connection is always there when we sing opera. When we talk about head voice and falsetto, it's always there. We never want to tell someone to go up on stage and sing in pure falsetto. No, that's not opera. But the connection to the chest does, as we ascend, thin in a way. It's just kind of how the chords thin. It feels like the connection starts to thin and thin and thin, but it's always there. How does someone achieve that? Find that connection?
Well, there are a few exercises which I think are really good for this, but the thing is, without someone with a very, very detailed ear, because the problem is with singing, when you do something, it may sound close, it may sound right, but unless someone's there literally listening to the inside of your throat and they know what they're talking about, and I would say 99% of people in this world, 99% of voice teachers in this world do not know what they're talking about. There's 1%, and some of them are very excellent. And you don't know what you have if you're not already there. That's the thing. I got lucky. I got really lucky with people who were good, and I had my filter, and I took what I could and I threw away what I didn't want to use. But 3 exercises I would recommend would be blending from head or starting in falsetto down into chest, 5-note scales, starting, say, if you're a tenor, start on an A natural. I'll find an A. I have a little piano here.
Yeah.
Usually I'll start these higher, maybe a B flat, but for most people, let's start on an A. It's a 5-note scale down. So all I'm doing is trying to maintain a deep laryngeal position for this. So yes, when we're actually singing roles and such, we don't necessarily need to maintain the lowest possible position of the larynx through the middle, because there's slight float in the larynx, so you have somewhere to go as you ascend into the top. Otherwise, you're going to get a woofy, big, dark, pressed, not really resonant sound in the middle. But for the blending exercise, you want to keep the longest vocal tract possible. So and most of the time when you're learning this, people will use the back of their tongue to hold the larynx down. It's a training wheel. We want the tongue to be completely supple. But if that happens, I'd rather that happen than having like the larynx completely grip or having a lot of glottis involvement. So realize, check yourself if you're using the back of the tongue to press the larynx down. It's a byproduct. It's a training wheel. This happens to all of us when we're learning to sing, have tongue tension. Unfortunately, it's just kind of a fact. It's something that you have to work out. It's like probably the hardest thing to get rid of. So starting head. You can move your jaw around, keep everything neutral. And as you get to the fifth on the bottom note, and as you go down, it becomes the fourth and the third. You want to be in something that is chest dominant. So I'm starting in this. It's different than falsetto. Hoo, hoo, hoo is air blown. Larynx lifts with you. The onset of head should feel like just the kiss of the chords, deep and sealed. And there's almost no air escaping at all. It's the sound is tiny. Do not be afraid of the smallest sound that you can make possible. It's just a little triple P thread of silver, but it's resonant. That's really, really small. Start blending that way. That's exercise 1. Exercise 2 would be tongue trills, starting in middle voice, going down, and then going up. Because with a lot of people do lip trills, or they do tongue trills out the mouth, like this way. These two exercises I do not like for men, because females you can do and you're in a more of a like our function of falsetto, which is more used in female singing. They have thread of chest, but it's more falsetto based than head based as men. Even though it's not actually falsetto, but it would feel like our falsetto. That functionally doesn't work for men. The best thing you can do for a man if you're trying to learn blending registration is doing tongue trills, because the tongue is out of the throat and high, but because your tongue is not pulled out, you're not pulling the soft palate. When you push the tongue out, you'll feel in the back of your throat, everything follows. And when you blow air through that position, everything wants to follow. I can manage it. You can manage it, but if you're trying to learn this, best thing is and then create a pocket behind that. So as you hear, I'm actually even there blending between registration. One's head, one's chest, and then as I go up, using very little air, but just enough air to keep the tongue trilling. So start on that. If you're a tenor, start on a D natural to a B flat, go down to D natural, B flat, take it up to a C on top. If you can maintain it without grabbing. We don't want to be, this is really pressed closed throat. We want to think of this exercise as spacious, completely free. Nothing, really you want to keep it as head dominant as possible, even when you're down low. That's another thing you can try to bring as much head down as you can into the bottom of the voice. And the final one is octave leaps. This one's very difficult, but you start in chest, decrescendo all the way until it's just the tiniest thread of sound. So I'm going through registration over an octave slide and then a scale down. but I
Mm-hmm.
never
Mm-hmm.
leave the depth, and I never blow air. I'm just maintaining the least amount of air that will keep the chords vibrating. That's all I'm doing.
Right, right. No, I love that. These are all great exercises to keep blending the voice and also never letting it fully disconnect completely either. Now,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the soft palate, right? I mean, we're talking about singing with an open throat. You very much keep your larynx in a very low position, which will be my next question. But just talk to me a little bit about the soft palate, okay? Do you feel, obviously, to make that space in order to be able to blend the registers and as we ascend, do you feel it raise? Is there a time where perhaps you drop it? Is this how do you perceive this idea of raising the low part, the soft palate?
I don't necessarily like the term raising the soft palate. It's
Okay.
should be something that is a byproduct, not the product. Um, a lot of teachers teach to raise the soft palate. To me, it can come across as false. And a lot of times when people artificially raise the soft palate, you get an adenoidal sound, which also is like a conurtal. Um,
Hmm.
you're falsely creating this pressure. And when you do that and the larynx follows, then you get a grip in the throat. You get the this sound because you feel like you're raising the center of the soft palate, but you're actually not. You're just obstructing the airway. So for me, I like to think of palate as wide. Um, the pillars. I don't know if you can even see this, but you have two fleshy pillars in your mouth right there right behind the molars essentially. So one thing you can do to find this width in the palate is stick your fingers on them and
Mhm.
pull slightly sideways, and you kind of just bite down on your fingers. Ah, ah. It starts to feel like you get a little bit of an extra pocket kind of behind the ears widthwise.
Ah,
And it also
uh-huh.
isolates the tongue because your tongue feels your fingers and you can kind of rest it on your fingers. It'll help you get rid of tongue tension that way. But no, I don't necessarily really think of a high palate because I think if you completely seal off the palate, how all of this gets shut off. So I think
Mhm.
the center
Mhm.
of the palate is depending on the vowel. Like
I like that.
sometimes if you say e, o, u, all the vowels change. Every vowel has a different sensation in the mouth. Every vowel has a in the pharynx. So for me, on like an I feel ah ah ah. I feel width in the palate, height behind the molars and side in the pharynx, but the center of the palate does not feel super high. That would be
Mhm.
ah 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 ah. It's you can use this as a exercise to train palate for height. Completely isolate and then try to say your vowels with the least amount of mouth movement as possible. But when you properly find a vowel that'll function within a tube and creates like an even sound across the voice,
Mhm.
it doesn't feel like a high palate. It feels more width. Um, on an ooh 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 yeah, ooh vowel does not feel like an extremely high palate in middle voice. As you go up, you have more height. But I think a lot of times people say the sensation of high palate is actually a sensation of resonance or spin that's actually happening above the soft palate.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Okay.
for me,
And as you would ascend, you would then feel more of an ascension in the palate, or would you
it
just
will
maintain it?
I think it'll feel like an ascension, but it's actually an ascension of the vibration. It's not necessarily the ascension of the palate. So
Okay.
if here's your palate, you have all your head resonators, all your space up here, and your mouth is down here. As we sing in chest, we, as we're going through passaggio, we narrow the throat, and we keep that pressure on the hard palate, right? And
Yeah.
through upper middle, we seal off the palate. But as we start to go into the top, that opening between registration needs to happen. So it feels like a slight fall of the back of the palate, and then the resonance will track along the center of the hard palate to the ridge between the hard and soft palate, and that's kind of like a laser beam focus point. But you also get a section that feels like it goes over, and the section that feels like it goes over is what people think of as high palate. But for me,
Mhm.
it's actually just a reaction of sound vibrating in your head above the palate. So that I think
Now
that
we.
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just that's to
Uh,
me the high palate sensation is resonance above the
yeah.
palate.
I was just going to say, how does someone who is also perhaps now trying to understand that concept not fall in the temptation of perhaps now trying to get too nasal because they're trying to open it and trying to keep perhaps the palate lower, but trying to feel that opening, and so then it goes towards that nasal quality that we obviously wouldn't want that either. But it's very close, but it's not the right way.
With your hand motion, you perfectly demonstrated what the problem is there. It's mental. If you go this way, you're always going to go into the mask, and it may sound nasal, and you can sound nasal without having your palate open at all. You can sound I made a nasal sound, but I'm not blowing air through my nose in that. So it's nasality is not necessarily a byproduct of air going through the nose over the palate. It's a byproduct of how that sound is formed in the pharynx. So that's a tricky thing. But what I would say is, once you're going over and you want to avoid nasality, think up and back. You have to stay anchored, but a lot of times nasality comes in when you lose your anchor and you think of vibration forward. I think that when I sing, I'm aiming backwards, and anything that comes forwards is a byproduct of a bounce forward. I'm not driving forward ever. It's always this way, and then this is a byproduct of that. So I feel pressure in my face. I feel resonance in the mask. I feel all of that, but I never drive it there. I'm going this way.
It's sort of like an echo or hitting and then going that way. Something like that.
Well,
that
yeah,
idea.
but even when you think, if you do this, you're going to screw yourself because you did it with one hand. You went this way, right? That's a thought which is going to screw you. You have to use two hands because the voice does not only have one resonating point. It's like a matrix. It's geometry. So there's one thread of sound which happens, and as that sound bounces, you have sound waves going in different areas. So points of resonance where you can find resonating cavities are, you have one, you don't release that one, and then it'll go forward. If you go this way, what you do is you think and you forget about that resonator, that cavity where it's actually bouncing, which is the most important one. You go that way, you've lost that one. Now your sound is crammed forward because you've lost this space behind it. It has to be multi-dimensional. It's got to be 3D. If you're in 2D, one place for my resonance, you're never going to have a balanced sound. And usually you're going to have constriction because you don't have the suspension to maintain. It feels like resonance is like pressure points that will suspend the vocal tract in the proper form of the vowel. So if you use those, laser beams of sound waves to suspend it, you don't have to do it with muscles because the sound waves do it for you. It feels like the space is a byproduct of seeing the vowel properly.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting because also going back to the terminology, a lot of people who say, think bright, think forward, or this is where it starts to hit the danger zone with a lot of people because, for example, like forward to someone else might be different to forward to you, to forward to me, or bright or front. And again, we're talking, we're dealing with a lot of involuntary muscles as well,
Yep.
and a lot of it does have to do with sensation. So it goes back into, being a balanced singer, being a balanced student in being able to familiarize yourself with all these terminologies, but understand the sensation, the science, and how it works with your own also unique voice. It's a lot that goes with opera singing that a lot of people don't understand. I think it's very underrated, especially the tenor voice, and I think that's why we're all in some way or form very neurotic people.
Yeah, I'm not really neurotic. I'm just well-oriented, excited in that sense. But I was going to touch on that, what you just said, if someone's getting told to sing forward, right? First off, if someone's telling you need to sing forward, they're probably not a good voice teacher. So, because that is such a blanket term. The problem is most people will not address the actual problem. Yes, maybe your sound needs to be more forward, but if someone says sing forward, that's not a voice teacher. That's someone telling you what I don't like about your voice. What they need to address, how do you approach getting your sound to come more forward, even if that's not what you need? A lot of the times to have a forward sound, you need to go backwards. And sometimes people are super forward, or it sounds like nasal, but it's because they're over pressing down, or they've gone too back. They've gone, and when you go too low, if the tongue is involved in pressing the larynx down, sometimes that's what pulls the palate. So you get the palate completely obstructing the airway, and you get a lot of sound coming through the nose.
Talking about forward, right? Because again, I've had so many teachers tell me things like that only just further confused me. Yeah, let's talk about a little bit about vowels. One of the also things that your sound, when I hear you, you have such an Italian, a great dominion of the Italian language, and I think that personally, I think that it does help. When people say, should I, learn the Italian language, or, well, maybe not learn to the point of fluent, even though that would be great, but at least familiarize yourself with pure, clear vowels. What is sort of your ideas about that, even though I think I know, because we have talked, I think, about this before. Your idea in singing pure, clear vowels, does that get modified? Does that change when you add the open throat, the space? Does it no longer become pure vowels? There's a lot of people that sing oh, is it oh, is it a mixture between the both? What's going on there as far as pure vowels, and how does that help in the singing?
I always try to sing everything as pure as possible. I want every word I say to be understood in the audience. I hate it when I sit there and it just sounds like mush coming out from singers. It drives me nuts. So I try to be clear with that. I think for me, vowels should be as clear as possible within the appropriate registration and the range of the voice. So the way I learned my vowels was just like the old school videos you see of Delmonico or anybody going e, o, u, right? You have clear vowels. I start in the bottom of the voice because it's the easiest place to learn it. So you would essentially dislocate your jaw backwards, not fully dislocate, but backwards, closed mouth, as close as possible. And you just be able to say every single vowel without moving your mouth, just pharyngally. Have clarity between each one. E, o, u. All I have for the O and the U, you have to gather slightly in the lips. But you may be able to do it without even, if you can stretch width in the pharynx enough. So, E, o, U. Even there, I didn't move my mouth, but there's still a semblance of that vowel. So for me, the problem with singers is they try to form their vowels here. Your vowels are not formed here, especially not in Italian. I mean, you go to southern Italy, you hear ah, 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 ah. I like the southern Italian ah. I think it's a better sung vowel than Milano this way. So, yeah, I mean, I like to think we'll start with ah vowel because it's the hardest vowel to sing properly, I think. I think I'm from the South, so I always tell people, like, if you have a grandmother or your mom and you call one ma or ma, hey ma, that's what it is. Hey ma, hey ma. It's not hey ma. That's New York. Hey ma. Already that's constriction in the throat. AW, slight AW, has a deeper throat position, which can be more lined up with the other vowels. So how do you keep all of your vowels as close as possible that live within this tube, which you can function properly at the chords? That's my thought on it. Sing pure vowels. And in the top for tenors, in say starting primo passaggio into the top right before the turn, the vowels become more mouthy. It becomes more ah. You can't, because if you go ah, you're going to turn. And a lot of times, if you turn too early, it's going to be taxing. You need to allow the larynx to float just a hair so you have somewhere to go once you get over the turn. For me, if you maintain a really anchored low laryngeal position through the middle, you're going to have more of the Giacomini sound. I mean, if that's what you're into, go for it. But I love Giacomini, but the voice was I mean, it was an outstanding voice. It's just not consistent, and it's not the way that I would choose to teach someone to sing or choose to sing, because it's just too taxing.
Yeah, and we know that from interviews and stories, we know that he had a problem with that same thing. Certain stamina, certain consistency. Even though
a lot of bad
voice, not, yeah.
But
fantastic
still,
sound.
When it worked, it was one of the most glorious things ever. So, yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I don't think I could sing like that.
Yeah. No, but I love that, because a lot of people, you come across singers who are still trying to, find the passaggio, the turn, the tilt, but perhaps their vowels start to become an obstacle. Perhaps they're, you hear it a lot of the time, very, very far back, very ingolato, very trying to keep this low larynx space. We start to find this, and a lot of modifying, and so it's great that your thoughts on this is very much to continue to keep words and vowels as clear as possible, which I think will help.
Usually it's a byproduct, though. It's so funny, because it's not always a choice. It's not something that someone's actively trying to darken their vowels. That's usually a byproduct of not having proper support, or having a functional vocal technique where glottis is your main form of closure. When you have to use glottis in that sense, and you're not actually just allowing the chords together, you have to start darkening earlier, and then you get the woolly dark sound. So if you hear someone who's singing extremely dark vowels, my first thought would be, how do we address bass phonation first? Because you can't sing a clear vowel with an overpressurized larynx. You can't. It will never be clear.
Right. So actually, in that case, would you then suggest that it's better to then perhaps not think about so much lowering and pressurizing the larynx, and just sing in a way that it's just more clear and natural, where the vowels are more closer to that Italian, and then we can add the laryngeal position later?
No, it's the other way around, I would say.
Then you would go the other way around?
Because you have to have the low laryngeal position, or ability to access it, to learn the turn. It's training wheels, I would say. First things first, a lot of young singers don't have a low laryngeal position. They haven't learned that. So take yourself time and just figure out what that feels like. I walked around for a long time. I probably looked crazy. I'd walk to work or whatever, just trying to maintain a low laryngeal position with my breath, not my tongue, with my body doing it. And then you talk like this, you sound like a baritone who's trying to impress somebody. But it's
yeah. No, I love that, because that was going to be my next question too. I get a lot of people who ask, then how do I maintain my larynx low without it being compressed, right? I try to do this yawn position, this, and now it's here, but now it doesn't feel very good, because it's very muscularly compressed. So actually, this idea of just kind of every day, having that, that laryngeal position low, it actually is a good advice for people to just play around with every day, because it has to be an everyday thing.
Without phonation, don't phonate while you're doing it.
Without phonation,
that's where you get the pressure built up.
Yeah.
So really, it's how well can you control your body? You're managing release of air. When you breathe in and hold your breath, you go, and then hold in your mouth or at your cords. I'm holding at my cords now, and you can hear that, right? What I do when I hold my breath is I breathe in, and I don't hold at my cords. I leave the throat completely slack and open. So the cords only come together when my brain says, I'm making a sound now. And then all I do is release a little bit of this resistance to gravity. Because if I breathe in and I let barometric pressure and gravity do it, I go, I've completely let out all my air. So all I'm doing now, I'm fighting barometric pressure and gravity, and that's maintaining the low laryngeal position. So
no, it's fantastic, because it has nothing to do then with any musculature pushing down or anything like that. I love that idea, which is great for people at home, to just breathe in without feeling the idea of no. Keeping it still open, because technically that's also kind of the suspension phase that we want right right before we exhale and actually sing.
Yeah. I would
Is it
say you
still
want it during.
still
I
open?
would say you want it during the entire phrase.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You don't
But
want it
what I'm saying is,
just-
even before we're about to sing, it's still
Yeah.
there. Like it's already prepared. Yeah,
And
it's great.
and when you
Any
at
go
the
ahead,
end of
sorry.
phrases, that space is there too. So if you're uh 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 as soon as I let go of that, the suspension still exists. So your breaths become silent for one, and your breaths become extremely fast. So
Mm.
it makes it a lot easier in life when you're singing these, quick lines like the in Madonna Sco, how is it? I baci tuoi son questi tuo amor, mare tuo bacio, dolce tesor, in te mi. All of those quick breaths become easy versus being like, abro figaro, bravissimo, abro figaro. It's not that. It should be
Right.
this. Every
Yeah,
time I stop talking, I'm filled with air.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think another
And,
thing that's helped me with that is diving and surfing because I'm always managing air. Like if you're surfing big waves and you're duck diving and duck diving and duck diving, sometimes you're underwater for a minute and you're just getting thrashed around. You just have to relax and allow it to happen because if you don't relax, you might die. So how do you, yeah, I think singing should be the sensation of relaxing into death. You never know what's going to happen on stage.
Especially being a tenor, you never know. Yeah, it just might happen. But that's right. You are. I mean, you're very much a huge fan of surfer. I mean, you surf, you swim. Another great singer. I mean, which I think is probably one of your idols from what I know. Franco Corelli being a fantastic swimmer as well.
Yeah.
That type, I don't know if it. I mean, I don't know much about it. I love swimming, but I'm not by any chance like at your level. But I don't know if it's sort of the lung capacity, the ability of being able to have certain control over or dominion over certain aspects of all of this, right? That the whole breathing apparatus that a lot of people don't have to go through day to day because they don't surf or they don't swim. But it definitely helps and aids.
I think it's a correlation actually, which people can work on themselves as upper body strength and feeling what it feels like to stretch. Because every time you swim and you breathe, this rib completely opens. When you do two, you can't feel it, but you feel this expansion in the rib, right? And you feel that your lat muscle is involved. So when you build up strength in your lats and you build up strength and expansion sideways of your rib cage, while also for me surfing, when I'm on a board and I'm paddling, I'm engaging my upper middle back because if you slouch down, you're paddling like this. To actually paddle a surfboard, you're doing like a half plank with just your back, and then your arms can open up. So your ribs are opening up. You're engaging the main support friend for singing at the same time. So I mean, one of those things you can do is work on lat pull downs or whatever, but I think it's better to have this
Yeah.
type of movement.
To this day, actually, I don't ever sing without actually doing certain stretches that stretch this entire area, and I really feel engagement. This is one of the main things I start stretching before I even sing.
Yeah.
I feel like, to the point that I feel like if this isn't stretched, I I almost can't breathe properly. Like I have to like really feel that stretch. And the fact that you also mentioned in your back, that sort of noble posture in which
Yeah.
things are more raised, which is such a I guess natural way I guess that you use for surfing. You know what I mean? Which your
Yeah, it's
back
built
is already
into
there.
swimming and surfing. So
It's
it
built in,
really
which is
strengthens that.
great. And so all of this to say then that the voice isn't also the instrument, right? Our instrument isn't just here or even just here. It's our body. When people
Yeah.
say that your body really, it really is. And there have been very famous singers, both old school and modern day, that even have canceled performances because oh my hip. I'm sore in my hip. I think Pavarotti is one of those that have canceled the performance because he felt soreness in his hip, and you'd think, well, why does he cancel a performance? It's his hip. Yeah, it's his body. His instrument is his body.
Yeah.
He's sore. He probably feels he's not going to feel the support as much as he can, or he'll feel some sort of pain or whatever it is that
Yeah.
will inhibit him. You know what I mean? So it is your body. It really is. A lot of it has to do with everything, the
Yeah.
stretching, the physicality, the muscles, the staying flexible. Tagging into the last question, because we know we talked a lot about the lower larynx. is speaking in sort of that lower laryngeal position, sort of that yawn. Is it also a good advice that you would give for people to start little by little developing how to maintain a low larynx without compressing? How is it that I can maintain this lower and lower every day without even while still feeling comfortable and relaxed?
Yeah, I think it can be used, uh, but I would say start out in your house by yourself because you're gonna annoy everybody around you. They're gonna think you're a total fool. So,
Yeah.
no, I think it
Hello.
can.
Hi, how are you?
Is you have to make sure you do it right. You should be recording yourself, listening back very closely, because if you do this and you start speaking, you hear whatever it is that you're hearing. You want to make sure that you're still being clear. I'm still being clear in my vowels. I don't have a ton of nasality in the sound. I'm not doing this like this right here. I wouldn't recommend that. I would say think of it as, if you're speaking low in chest, think of it as hard palate, back, and below. Don't think of anything above. If you're learning this position, you're gonna feel your resonance probably right behind the nose or something. But it can be useful. But a lot of people will do it and they'll go, well, yeah, I'm pressing my voice low now. Don't think about that. Keep it easy, free. You don't, and it's hard, but you're gonna realize that to be able to speak, I'm speaking now with a sustained low laryngeal position, but I'm trying to maintain it with my body, and I'm just letting gravity do the work of support. I'm never doing this.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can fall into that temptation because as soon as they start to lower the larynx and they're like, oh, my voice is now nicer and darker and warmer. This must be my operatic sound. But then you're falling into that artificial fakeness again. You don't want to go down there. It's not going to help you at all. When you start singing, if anything, it's going to fatigue you more and more and more. And you're going to be compressing it with your tongue.
It's a good tool to learn. I think it's a really good tool to learn. And because as tenors, men, we do have to build some sort of stamina and strength in glottis apparatus, because we do use glottis. We just want to use as little as possible because it's taxing. But you will have to use it. So especially right above the turn, like a G natural is probably the most glottis you're going to feel, because you're going through a release and then you're kind of in a mix, because once you're at A flat A, you can open up again and not use glottis. But the G's and the F sharps, those are the notes, at least where my passaggio sits. Like my primo passaggio starts on an, let's go by an A vowel, is like B flat, low B flat, and then F sharp I work to keep half open. So G is the first note, really fully over the turn on an A vowel. Sometimes I turn F sharp, sometimes I turn Fs, depending on the phrase. But
I always say that no one can actually, F sharp especially, no one will ever be able to tell you when and when not to turn it. It's either half sort of covered or fully covered, but it depends on the musical phrase.
Yeah.
But for function, I feel like the best presence in an F sharp is usually half open, half covered, in that area.
I never sing F sharps wide open. That's for sure.
Yeah, never fully open, just always sort of still just about that turn. And you actually mentioned something that our other past two guest tenors, Andrew Owens and Santiago Ballerini, have also talked about, which is recording yourself. Hey, isn't that, we live in the 21st century where we can record ourselves, and that is literally the best tool. I don't understand people that don't record themselves. I mean, every day, record yourself. It's going to be the biggest indicator of, do you like the sound? Compare it to one of your reference points, to the singers that you like. What are they doing? What are you doing? And it's also going to help people.
Try to keep your phone like 10 feet away while you're recording, though.
Yeah.
Because when the phone gets too close, it's put it as like within your practice room, like say 8 to 15 feet or 8 to 14 feet away, because the closer you are, your sound's going to get distorted. You won't hear what's actually functionally happening clearly, so unless you're singing very softly. But even then, there's compression built in, so it's a little difficult to hear. Give yourself some space between your recording device.
Absolutely. The last thing I want to talk to you, and this will be the last question. When you start applying all these concepts to music, right? So you have the technique concepts in which we talked all about that, and now we have words and consonants, and we have dynamics and the part that is more artistic. How can someone go about slowly, of course, because everything we do is gradually. How can we go about slowly applying these concepts without allowing, for example, things like consonants to get in our way and break the beautiful, for example, legato that we have found in singing a free vowel, and then obviously the dynamics between singing something piano, like, and then singing something more declamatory, which is forte, without it hindering our technique completely, which I know is quite a hell of a question, but
yeah, I mean, that's kind of complicated because that's very advanced stuff.
yeah.
Like, like even 75% of professional singers out there can't do that. So or they do it very poorly. So I think that's such an individual basis. Like, what I mean, yes, always sing a phrase. For me, consonants, coaches especially in the States and the scholastic system has so many people doing like te ta, like p k t, like they're like spit out your consonants. But I would say that is a massive red flag. You don't ever want to spit out your consonants unless you're a character voice doing patter. Sure, go ahead, do that if that's what you're doing now. If you're singing character stuff, do whatever you want, because your sound is based on a character sound. It's not supposed to be this flowing sound that is required by romantic leads. I think of consonants as inward. If you're blowing consonants out, you're going to blow the larynx up. I mean, so legato gets destroyed by this, but you have to sing through your consonants, and also use your consonants as springboards. Any of your plosive, or nasal consonants. Learn how to sing an M that is completely egg space in the back. I mean, there's space behind it. It's free. The vowel comes back afterwards. Ta, ta, ta. For me, ta, ta, ta. It's almost like the beginning of a TH for a T. If you go ta, ta, that's already here. If you go ta, 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 and that will actually be clear in the house because it's going to go with the sound. P, 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 P. I don't know. I practice your consonants inward. I mean, the idea of being clear with your language is a giant problem with legato, I think. And also the idea of not scooping between notes. Like, I don't like scooping, but I think everything should be connected. And the onset of a note as having a caress. I like to call it a caress. It's old school. The old school singers sang with caresses. Yes, there are times where you don't sing with caress. You don't sing to musette lady. You sing to musette lady el cuor, like that. It's not every note, but especially in the lower middle, if you want to keep an easy phonation and lowered position, you have to caress into that note, because if you attack it, a lot of the times your whole vocal system will jump, and then you have to rely on glottis, and that's going to destroy your legato. If you're relying on glottis for everything, your legato is going to suck.
That's fantastic advice. I love that, to caress the attacks of those notes all the time. And you do hear it. You hear it all the time. I mean, if you're a really good listener, you hear it in the old school singers all the time. That it's not necessarily an over exaggerated type of portamento, but it's the caress as they touch on the note and they continue. A lot of good exercises that some people suggest, for example, is if you have a phrase that you're trying to learn in music, start with one vowel. And then perhaps once you feel the legato, everything is vibrating very smoothly between one note and the next. Then add the vowels of the words. So if it's like una furtiva lagrima, ua, uia, whatever it is, and then being able to sing that, and then add the consonants at the very end, making sure that it never disrupts the work that you've done before, that beautiful flow of legato. And you'll probably find that, like Matt said, it's not plosive. Una furtiva la. It's just like, what the heck? The larynx is definitely going to pop completely. Maintaining that beautiful column of space and everything you've worked on, everything spinning.
I'm just thinking about that. Sorry, my brain goes.
I'm actually starting to sing now Russian repertoire. It's funny how something that is completely foreign to my world. You know, I speak Spanish, I speak a little bit of Italian and English. All of this kind of J glides, which funny enough, I love now singing in Russian. I mean, memorizing words in Russian takes me forever, but singing in Russian has such a, like you said, like it has a caress to their language. It's so caressing to the to when you to singing. It's almost like a ooh, yeah, ooh, where the vowel kind of melts into the next one. And
There's a lot of
and
diphthongs in Russian that are
yeah,
slow diphthongs, which
yeah.
can be helpful for people with. It can cover up problems, but it can also be helpful. So if you have a lot of tongue tension and you're singing Russian, a lot of the times, like it'll actually sound proper in Russian because your glides are slow, so you can slowly move that kind of rock tongue. But if you do it well and you think about it as an exercise for the tongue, you can do it freely. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
hear
like that.
a lot of old Russian singers, which are fabulous singers, but you hear a lot of tongue sounds in Russian voices because I think it's built into the language, that really slow movement of the tongue versus Spanish or Italian, where it's a quick, easy release of the tongue.
But yeah, working on those ways to always maintain the legato. I kind of like little J glides to keep the vowels, you know, continued and never breaking in a way. But Matt, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You've given us so much, a wealth of information, both basic and advanced. It really comes from, I mean, it speaks volumes of, you know, your education, your intellect, your approach to your voice, and your experience, you know, being able to sing these roles in great stages all over the world, really. Hoping to see you soon again. I mean, at some point, buddy. Be able to hang out again. That'll be nice. Yeah, I wish you the best of luck. What do you have sort of coming up for the people to know? Perhaps maybe they'll be able to watch you live or buy some tickets to see you.
The next thing I have coming up is Don Carlo, the Italian, in Copenhagen. I think we open in September. So
September.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So everybody around Copenhagen in that area, come watch this guy. He is absolutely fantastic. Really, really beautiful voice. Thanks again, Matt.
Thanks, Jose. Same to you.
Appreciate your time. Really, really do. And wish you all a goodbye, and to the people at home. Hope you enjoyed the content and continue working. Hang in there. Continue studying, and the work continues like always. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.